everybody knows that myself and my wife wished to carry on, but was stopped from being able to do that.
The pen hovered. King Charles III stared at the unsigned line at the bottom of the page, his hand frozen an inch above the paper. Behind him, the room was silent. The advisors had left. The lawyers had delivered their briefing and departed. Even William had stepped outside, unable to watch his father sign away his brother's identity. The document itself was brief, formal, cold. 2 sentences would strip Prince Harry of the title he'd carried since birth. 3 more would ban Meghan Markle from British soil indefinitely. And 1 final clause, buried near the end, would seal every private letter, every plea for reconciliation, every broken promise between father and son inside the royal archive, classified for 30 years. Charles lowered the pen, not to sign, just to touch the surface of the desk, grounding himself in something solid while the decision tore him in two. Before we continue, make sure you subscribe, because what happens next will reshape the British monarchy in ways no one saw coming. This wasn't rage, it wasn't revenge, it was something far worse, necessity. Because 3 weeks earlier, Harry had made a choice, and that choice had set all of this in motion. William found his brother sitting alone in a side room at Windsor. No cameras, no aides. Just 2 men who had once walked behind their mother's coffin together, now facing each other across a chasm neither knew how to cross. Harry spoke first. "You didn't have to come yourself." William didn't sit. He remained standing by the door, arms folded, his jaw tight. "Yes, I did." The silence stretched, not the comfortable kind. The kind that carried years of resentment, disappointment, and words that could never be unsaid. Finally, William stepped forward and placed a single sheet of paper on the table between them. "This is the last option, Harry. The only one left." Harry glanced down but didn't touch it. William continued. "Sign this. Admit that Windsor was a mistake. Agree to confidentiality, and you keep the title. And if I don't, then father removes it permanently." Harry's head snapped up. His eyes searched his brother's face for any trace of bluff. There was none. "You can't be serious." "I wish I wasn't." Harry stood so fast the chair scraped across the floor. "This is about control. It's always been about control." "This is about trust." William's voice cracked. "You gave your word, Harry, in front of father, in front of the Queen's household. You promised that night at Windsor would stay private." "I didn't break it." "Then how did it end up in a production script?" The question hung in the air like an accusation neither could take back. Harry looked away. "Meghan didn't." "Don't." William's voice dropped to something colder. "Don't make this about her. You stood in that room, you shook father's hand, you swore nothing would be used for content. And I meant it. Then explain the transcript." Harry opened his mouth, closed it. The truth was complicated, the explanation messy, and William's expression made it clear he wasn't interested in nuance. The future king pointed at the unsigned agreement. "You have 1 hour. After that, the decision is out of both our hands." He turned to leave. "Will." William stopped but didn't turn around. "If I sign this, does it change anything between us?" The pause that followed was the most honest thing either brother had said in years. "No," William finally said. "But at least you'd still be a prince." The door closed behind him. Harry stared at the agreement. His hands trembled as he picked it up, read the terms again, and then slowly, deliberately, tore it in half. 60 minutes later, the palace received his answer. Not in words, in action. Harry's refusal triggered a protocol most royal aides had never seen used. A constitutional process so rare, so severe that even mentioning it in advisement meetings felt extreme. But Charles had prepared for this. 2 versions of the decree had been drafted weeks earlier. One that preserved Harry's status under strict conditions, and one that ended it entirely. The internal council convened in the king's private study. No media, no records. Just 6 people who would decide how far the crown could, and should, go. A senior constitutional lawyer opened the session. "Your Majesty, the legal authority is clear. The title Prince is granted by the sovereign and can be revoked at the sovereign's discretion. However, we must consider the public response." William, seated to his father's right, spoke next. "The public has watched this unfold for years. Every boundary we set, they crossed. Every olive branch, they turned into content. At some point, the institution has to defend itself." A security advisor interjected. "There's another complication. Our intelligence indicates Ms. Markle was planning an unannounced UK visit, filmed, For a charitable project, despite our explicit warnings. Isa says still. Charles looked up sharply. When? Next month. The production team had already secured permits for filming near royal properties. The king's face hardened. One of the older advisors, a woman who had served the late Queen, leaned forward. Your Majesty, if I may, removing the title will be seen as punitive. Banning her from the country will be seen as cruel. Together, it will dominate global headlines for weeks. Then let it, William said quietly, because the alternative is letting them dictate terms to the crown. And that's not a precedent we can afford. Charles said nothing. His silence was the loudest thing in the room. Finally, he spoke. What about private contact? Between myself and my son? The constitutional lawyer hesitated. That remains entirely within your personal discretion, Your Majesty. The decree affects titles and territory, not family. Then draft the final version, Charles said. With one addition, Harry will retain direct access to me, not through staff, not through lawyers, me. William looked at his father, surprise flickering across his face. He's still my son, Charles said softly, even if he's no longer a prince. The meeting adjourned. The decree was finalised, and at 11:47 p.m, King Charles III signed his name at the bottom of the page. The document arrived in California by secure courier at dawn. Meghan signed for it. Harry was still asleep. She opened the envelope in the kitchen, pulling out the official palace letterhead, and began reading. Her expression shifted with every line. By the time she reached the third paragraph, her hands were shaking. By the fifth, she had to sit down. The decree didn't just remove Harry's title. It erased him from the line of succession documents. It stripped his name from ceremonial records. It revoked his access to royal residences. And then, near the end, she found her own name. Meghan Markle, Duchess of Sussex, is hereby prohibited from entering the United Kingdom under any circumstances, public or private, until such time as this order is formally rescinded by the reigning sovereign. She read it again, then a third time. No exceptions, no appeals, no funerals, no weddings, no goodbyes. Britain had just become a country she could never set foot in again. Harry found her 20 minutes later, still sitting at the table, the decree spread out in front of her. What is that? She didn't answer, just slid the papers across to him. He read in silence. When he reached the part about his title, his face went pale. When he saw the travel ban, his jaw clenched. And when he found the clause about sealed correspondence, the hidden threat that any public challenge would release years of private letters, his hands curled into fists. They wouldn't. They already did, Meghan said quietly. Harry stood, pacing the length of the kitchen, his breath coming faster. This is William. This has his fingerprints all over it. It has your father's signature. That stopped him cold. He turned back to the decree, flipping to the final page. And there it was, the king's formal signature. Dated, witnessed, not a threat, a done deal. For 3 days, Harry said nothing publicly, but privately he made one call. Not to William, not to palace lawyers, not to the press, to his father. Charles answered on the second ring. It was late in London. The king was alone in his study, the same room where he'd signed the decree. Harry. Why? One word, but it carried everything. Charles exhaled slowly. Because I had no choice left. You always have a choice. Not when trust is gone. Harry's voice cracked. I didn't leak Windsor. I didn't approve that script. I know. The admission hit harder than any accusation. You know? I believe you didn't intend it, Charles said carefully. But intent doesn't erase consequence. That transcript came from somewhere. And whether you handed it over yourself or it slipped through people around you, the result is the same. The one place I asked you to protect became public material. Harry closed his eyes. So you take away everything. I take away the title, because the title comes with trust, and that trust is broken. What about Meghan? You banned her from the entire country. Charles's voice softened. That was the council's recommendation, based on security and protocol concerns. Concerns you signed off on? Yes. The silence between them felt like an ocean. Finally, Harry asked the only question that mattered. Am I still your son? Charles's voice broke. You will always be my son. Then why does this feel like you're erasing me? Because, Charles said quietly, sometimes being a father means letting go, even when it destroys you. The call ended. Neither man said goodbye. The announcement broke globally at 6 a.m. London time. Within an hour, Buckingham Palace was surrounded, not by protesters, by cameras. The British public fractured instantly. Some held signs reading, "Protect the Crown." Others carried flowers with notes that said, "A family shouldn't need decrees." News networks ran split screens, Harry and Meghan's California home on one side, the palace on the other. Commentators debated whether this was strength or cruelty, discipline or revenge. But one image dominated every front page. A photograph of the Buckingham Palace balcony, empty, taken at sunset. The headline beneath it simply read, "The Missing Son." William saw the image on his phone and felt his stomach turn. Catherine found him standing alone in their private sitting room, staring at the screen. "You did what you had to," she said gently. "Did I?" She didn't answer, because they both knew the truth. The crown was protected, but the cost had been catastrophic. 3 weeks later, King Charles issued his only public statement on the matter. It was brief, formal, and heartbreaking. The decision to revise Prince Harry's titles and restrict access to the United Kingdom was not made lightly. It reflects the monarchy's duty to uphold the trust placed in it by the British people. While my son will always remain part of this family in private, his public role within the institution has concluded. I ask for privacy as we navigate this difficult chapter. No questions were taken, no interviews were given. The statement was released and the palace moved on. But inside the private quarters, late that night, Charles sat alone in his study once more. On his desk sat a photograph, decades old, faded at the edges, 2 young boys standing beside their mother. One of them was Harry. The king reached out and touched the frame. Then he turned it face down, not out of anger, out of grief. In California, Harry placed his old royal insignia, the crest he'd worn during military service, into a drawer and closed it. Meghan stood in the doorway, watching. "Are you okay?" He didn't answer right away. Finally, he nodded. "I have to be." But neither of them believed it. Harry lost the title that connected him to his mother, his country, and his childhood. Meghan lost the ability to ever return to the place that had once been her home. William carried the weight of being the man who enforced his brother's exile. Catherine watched her husband grieve a relationship that would never heal. Charles remained king, but became lonelier as a father. And the crown? The crown survived, not because it was loved, but because it proved it could still enforce its will. The palace gates closed, the decree became history, and the monarchy moved forward, not united, not whole, but still standing. If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more untold royal stories. Because the crown's next decision may be even more shocking.